Hello, my kako. Hello, Professor. As by now, you know my name already. My name is Bailey Kaliopu. Today is Friday, July 18th, 2024. Um, this is ED 330, SPED Law and IP Development. And the title for today or today's assignment is for the Inquiry-Based Learning assignment. Number two, IBL. How will I modify the instruction across curriculum for English language learners with disabilities? So just a little rundown on what is today going to be about. A little overview. So how does it affect learners? We got some reflection questions, such as, see if I can move this box to the side. What are the most important things? And I'll understand more deeply about the issue investigated. What are some misconceptions I had about the issue? If I had more time, what additional resources could I tap into? And why was it important to inquire about the issue? We'll then jump into how does this affect the teacher? So me, how can I apply the new knowledge I obtained from my research in the real world? What connections I can make or can I make between the information I gathered and my own experiences? And what are some questions or concerns I still have about the issue? What are particular audiences or what particular audiences would benefit from my information that I gathered today? And how would I present it? And what is something significant I learned about the sources or any other part of the process of inquiry-based learning? We then go into the learner's development and background. So the student's grade level, gender, age, disability, and their cultural, linguistic development background. The IEP goals, the evidence-based practices, strategies, and individualized learning across curricula, and then some credible sources. Here we go. All right, so see if we could drop this down again. Reflection. So, how does this affect learners? One of the most important things I now understand more deeply about the issue investigated. One, I noticed that English language learners with a disability can be accommodated in all content areas in regards to vocabulary, and there's a wealth of information of supporting ELL students to support. Sorry, there's a wealth of information for supporting ELL students to support, modify, and provide differentiated instruction. Um, so yeah, just like I said, I found a lot of information in regards to English language learners with disabilities and without disabilities. And yeah, I'm excited to get into it. What are some misconceptions I had about this issue? So one misconception was ELLs with disabilities should receive services and instructions in English, um, which is not true. Um, Also, the strategies provided to ELL students without a disability are different from ELL students with a disability. So, that's something interesting that I sort of came across. I guess in my own thoughts was, the services for an ELL student with a disability is the same or is different than services for students that are ELL with out a disability. So one or the other, ELO students with a disability and the ELO students without a disability. Um, and I just found out that, those strategies may be different. A lot of times, the same strategies are used between the two different students. All right. All right, so reflection. So how does it affect learners? Continuing. Number three. So if I had more time, what additional resources could I tap into? I think one interesting resource I came across about was from the Regional Educational Laboratory, Northwest Islands. Um, and basically it was the question that posed was how to determine whether students struggled with English language proficiency or learning disability. So they gave three steps or three bullet points over here, which is establishing relationships with parents, bilingual education and education teachers, speech pathologists, trained interpreters, and other help identify the and others to help identify students' needs. Number two, using data from sources such as attendance records, classroom observations, and standardized tests and school assessments results that could focus on knowledge and skills, not just English proficiency. And then number three, considering students' skills in English and their native language and create classrooms that value their cultural and linguistic backgrounds. Um, Number four, why was it important to inquire about this issue? Personally, I lacked awareness with ELL students. with ELLs and wanted to gain strategies and resources from my research and to use for incoming math students this upcoming year. And inclusive education. So just addressing the needs of all ELLs with disabilities, create an equitable learning environment, and differentiate instruction. So using specific strategies, tools, technology, resources that addresses language development and disability related to ELLs with a disability. All right, so how does this affect the teachers? So question number five, how can I apply the new knowledge I obtained from my research in the real world? Well, one, I will be able to understand how to assess specific needs of ELLs with disabilities through assessments that would evaluate their cognitive abilities, language proficiency, and any specific challenges. Number two, IP development. So this is a big one. I'll be able to collaborate with other educators, other personnel, ELL specialists, and family members to create relevant IP based upon that student's language and disability or related needs. Bullet point three, establish an inclusive environment. So incorporate relevant materials, visual examples that represents the student's background, cultures to make them feel valued and supported. And then number four, I'll be able to use differentiated instruction strategies such as incorporating visual aids, bilingual vocabulary and mathematical terms, and by offering bilingual support through peer interactions to offer bilingual support. Sorry. Number six, what connections can I make between information I gathered and my own experiences? So I found that collaborating with colleagues, I would be able to analyze how these strategies for modifying instruction will strengthen the collaboration between myself and my colleague in an inclusive environment to improve outcomes for ELLs with a disability. Also, from last year's experience, our student who was deemed as ELL without the disability engage in strategies such as guided practice, color coding, using manipulatives, and working one-on-one. However, now reflecting upon it, we did not engage, or I did not engage in cultural vocabulary enhancement strategies and visual aids that incorporated student background. Um, some continuous professional development for me as well. So I'll be able to use these profound strategies, evidence-based practices, and interviews with Professor Lillian to compare and contrast approaches discussed that are discussed in the future and identify any areas that would need improvement in my current practices. Just a continuation. So number seven, what are some questions or concerns I still have about the issue? Just shooting out some questions. One of them was, how will I be able to appropriately effectively engage in communicating families and parents and guardians of ELLs with a disability when there may be language barriers or cultural differences already? Um, you know, in regards to a lot of students who are ELL, that they're normally the first generation um of students that is experiencing this new educational system. So meaning that their parents is um, first native language speakers and whatnot. What are the best methods for measuring the academic progress of ELLs with disabilities, and how can I use that data to continually improve my instructional strategies? So just getting an idea of like what probes to use, um, what probes to you on top of the wider assessment or the wider that wider testing for ELLs, but like what other probes can you use for students with ADHD or other disabilities? And then what ongoing professional development opportunities are available in the latest research and best practices in this particular area? Question eight. So which particular audiences would benefit from the information I gathered? So for me, I wanted to concentrate on the Marshallese community. So ELO students of Marshallese descent and background are the audience that I chose for this target IBL assignment. Since this approach was flexible in the sense that instructional strategies such as the visual checklist and incentives, as well as the culturally responsive strategies such as making sure that materials used represents the diverse learners, and providing language word for the English word can be altered for all student cultural backgrounds. So I wanted this presentation to be as sort of flexible as possible with the diverse communities that we have out here in Hawaii. But definitely I was targeting the Marshallese community Marshallese students who um, are one of our biggest populations in Hawaii, who is deemed as ELL students. Not necessarily ELL with a disability, though, interestingly. And then parents and families with ELLs with disabilities. So this information would be would be present in parent-teacher conferences and informational handouts at home. Some of the content that would be included are explanations of the modifications and supports available for the child, some strategies for supporting learning at home, resources or additional support, and questions and feedback. And this information would also be best to present to a special education team or my gen ed colleagues. This information will be presented in a course likes, maybe possibly department, academy huddle meetings to share strategies and digital resources. And it just give us opportunities to co-plan lessons, sharing resources for best practices, and detailed strategies for integrating language development, and discussions on the individual student needed tailored needs and supported plans. And finally, question number 9. So, what is something significant I learned about the sources or any other part of the process of the inquiry-based learning? One was gathering information from credible resources and professionals with experience in working with ELL and discovering strategies and evidence-based practices that has worked well um, and saved time and narrow research. So I noticed that just this process allowed me to save more time research and also not trying to not reinvent the wheel. And also, I also noticed that I was able to reflect upon the missed opportunities that I had incorporated for our ELL student last year. Um, Although he did not have a disability, um, I wasn't aware of the academic, behavioral, or culture responsive strategies that I came across of this year. And something interesting, I also noticed that Micronesia students who are English language learners are also Western school system learners as well, which is the acronym for ELAWSSLS. All right, so some learners development. So my hypothetical student that I made was Kimball. So something about him was his grade level was sophomore, 10th grade, is male, age of 15 years old. His eligibility category. So, um, Kimball is eligible for special education services. He is eligible for IEP under the category of other health impaired. So his culturally and linguistic diverse background. So Kimball, a Chucky's native from the Federated States of Micronesia, relocated to Oahu at the age of 6. He's been in Oahu for a total of 9 years, and his primary language spoken within his home is Chuk. Kimball, even with varying levels of fluency in English, does well with speaking, but lacks instructional direction and comprehending vocabularies. Due to his ADHD, Kimball struggles with attention, impulse control, or he's always known to be on the go, and organization. Instructional accommodations, lesson adaptation, and supports are needed for Kimball. All right. So Kimball's individualized educational program, or one of his IEP goals that I created, was for math. So uh, his first IEP goal was creating equations or create equations that describe numbers or relationships. Um, this is one of our Common Core standards, so which is A.CED number 2, which is just to basically create equations in two or more variables to represent relationships between quantities, graphs, equations, or on coordinate axes with labels and scales. Um, how would we measure this goal? So by the end of the fourth IEP reporting period, when given a set of mathematical computation problems at a 10th grade level equivalency, Kimball will improve his mathematics computations and mathematics reasoning skills to solve the problem in 4 out of 5 trials with 80% accuracy. Some progress towards annual goals would be measured. So this would be measured by through teacher made tests. Um, this can be done through the summative tests that a lot of the teachers hand out at Waiana High School, observation records, and daily work. Um, Also formative assessments as well. And then the benchmarks, so short-term objectives. So when given an algebraic equation, Kimber will be able to solve 1 to 2 step equations using inverse operations in 4 out of 5 trials with 80% accuracy. And when given an algebraic equation, Kimber will be able to simplify expressions using the distributive property by combining like terms. So from evidence-based practices, I also noticed that sheltered instruction practices would be best too for help Kimball along in his way in completing his goal. This involved designing content-driven instructions, develop comprehensible input, and and it also includes entails several different components. So sensory scaffolds, which is like incorporating images and models to help teach the content to Kimball. Interactive scaffolds allowing the students to learn through social interaction. So Kimball will be allowed to interact with his other peers as well. You know, so he'll get different levels of interacting. Um, with different English proficiency students, and graphic scaffolds, so offering graphs, tables, and infographics to learn the content. One thing I wanted to highlight was just the sequence chart. So I noticed that this is especially beneficial for Kimball, since he has ADHD that represents a sequence of steps. So basically, um, his math teacher would provide him this, which is like a 4 sequence step of just understanding the problem, devising a plan around the problem, carrying out the plan, and then just looking back or checking your answers. So this is a great tool that's exceptionally important for Kimball in being successful in completing his IEP goal. And just fostering language is another component. Language mini lessons, so mini lessons on vocabulary that students might come up to. Basically, what we'll do is we'll pull Kimball back in small groups, and then just sort of assess or sort of go over the vocabulary that 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 we will see in the future and whatnot, and then just social interactions opportunities with other levels of peer teachers. Just continuing. So an IP goal number two. Sorry, IP goal number two and evidence-based practice number two. So for this one is in regards to hiccups, or in regards to more like behavior wise for Kimball and his health. So decision making and goal setting. Basically, use decision making and goal setting setting skills to enhance health. A measurable annual goal would be within the IEP year. Kimball will be able to follow a visual checklist for classroom routine and remain on task for the length of the academic assignment. Um, so we basically wanted to measure how well Kimball will be able to stay focused, and we'll be able to use a checklist to see if how well is he doing with progressing throughout the class and meeting those check marks. So some progress towards the annual goal. So how will it be measured? It will be measured through observations, records, teacher records, and then daily work. And then benchmarks, so short-term objectives. So when given a task or direction, Kimball will begin the task within 1 minute and remain on task for a minimum of 50 minutes with no more than 2 prompts out of the 5 independent tasks. So some evidence-based practices that works for this is implement culturally responsive instructions. So we will provide visual aids with general, academic, and domain-specific vocabularies in English and in Chucky's wording. So a lot of times when we come across certain math problems and whatnot, um, we normally would have vocabulary words that is um, we'll normally highlight some vocabulary words that is important for the math lesson and the lesson to come, and we can translate that in both English and in Chucky's wording for Kimball. And then just tying incentives to that visual checklist. So just keeping a reward system in place. Um, for Kimball. So one of them was like create a reward system for every 4 consecutive checks, and incentives will be provided. So basically, um, um, if while Kimball is working within that 15 minutes, if he has 4 checkbox that's already checked within those 15 minutes, he has the opportunity to gain a reward such as a snack, whatnot, or provide negative reinforcement, which is basically just removing something that's deemed something that's normally that students normally feel like uncomfortable with, or that students, it's basically like removing problems. So instead of Kimbo doing all 8 problems, he probably would do like 6 problems instead. So just removing problems from um from his assignments. And then I also wanted to note about this instructional strategy, which is concrete representational abstract, or CRA. It's a type of instructional strategy, which is an effective strategy to help with memory for new information and recall, such as graphic organizers, mimics, and processes. And this image that you see here below is actually it's actually a mnemonic representation, and it's a draw mnemonic representation of basically using visuals, or basically using circles and symbols to represent a mathematical equation. But this is exceptionally important in helping Kimball to be with this IEP goal, and basically staying on task and using his checklist, because this would help him to recall in memory. So this would help him within his duration of his 15 minutes of recalling um, um, important steps regarding his ADHD. Um, and then so some individualized learning strategies was one. So a confidential survey. So this one is a little bit unique. This is just for us to get to know Kimball more. Just asking him, what island did he come from? Where's she living? How many people are there? Are parents working? What times are they working? And if they're attending church on Sundays, just to help further develop strategies. And this came from actually a former teacher taught, who was actually the very first person in Hawaii Island that taught students of Marshallese cultural background, and he ended up living inside the Marshall Islands for over 20 plus years, where he learned the culture and the ways of um, of Marshallese students, and um, how disengaged are they from our traditional school systems and whatnot. So these are just some of the questions or strategies that he provided in order to help us to gain more or further insight on how could we be able to help Kimball more, or students just like Kimball. And another thing is just culturally responsive strategies. So finding out if there are community organizations that we can share with Kimball or students, or other students, and making sure that materials represents diverse backgrounds of visuals and vocabulary charts, and just modeling and guided practice. Um, so these are my credible sources that I used, and yeah, that's it. That concludes my presentation. Mahalo. Kinisao.